Hey guys, Chris Dick here. So today I'm going to be bringing us into part 15 of my user services series. And what we're going to be specifically looking at is applying a view or set of views anyway to manage employees in our company. Now, in order to do that, we have a few views that we have to look at. I'm going to look at the edit view, which is going to allow me to make changes to the company details, plus adding things like employees. So if you see here in the details view, we'll also add this bullet list here, the unordered list to details, so that it displays what employees are actually part of the company. I should be able to edit that and also display no data. The next thing, I should have a functional create view, which allows me to create a company and add employees as well. And of course, we have our delete feature, which allows us to delete employees. Now, the delete feature, of course, what it does is it makes sure that if there's any employees in the list of employees, it goes off and deletes them before it deletes the company. So there's a few things to think about in terms of process. So let's dig in and get started. So in order to do this, we want to think about what the view is actually doing. So one of the things that this does is it draws in a list of users, okay? And those would be considered potential employees, right? So if I select that, this is my current list of employees. If I have no employees, it's going to show no data. So those are the really the use case around what this does. Now, in order to get that list of employees, the first thing that we need to do is have a user's repository. And because of the way we've set up our repository base, now we can actually have this really great feature where I can get a user's repository up and running really fast. So we'll call it users repository, and it needs to inherit the base repository with application user. There we go. We'll implement the controller here, or the constructor. Now, one thing that I need to do is in this user repository, I need a feature that I'll override the get all. Now, get all in this case is I'm going to override it because I want to say I want to get all the users, but maybe there's certain users that I don't want to always come up as a potential employee. Things like admin and maybe there's specific usernames or emails that I want to remove. So this gives us the opportunity to do that. So I'm going to show you what we need to have in place to make that work. So I'm going to override get all. And in this case, we're always going to be returning get all from the base, but what we are going to be doing is overriding this with a where. So to do that, what I'm actually going to be looking for in this case is where the email does not contain my name. Okay, so this here will automatically eliminate any of the emails that have my name in them. And of course, you could set up a whole list of criteria here. This is your opportunity that would allow you to make that happen. So let's go ahead and start looking at the user context. Now, the user context, if you recall, the way this works, it gets injected into the controller. So by having it in the controller, now my controller can consume data from a wide variety of repositories. So in this case, what I'm looking at here is I need to have a connection with user repository. I'm going to call that users. I'm adding this to the interface, and that means that I can implement the interface. But before I implement the interface fully, I need to have a variable declared here, or a private property. So there we have it. And the next thing we need to do in the constructor is to instantiate. So we'll also do that. And now we have our users repository instantiated. And then for the property for users, it's actually just showing user, and it should be users. So I'm going to change that there. There we have it. So users will return the user repository, just like the companies does. Okay, so now we have a link to users in our user context. So we can now go into the controller and start thinking about how the controller would actually interact with some of the features. Now, something that we want to think about here is we have an overridable function, override create initialize view. Now, in this create initialize view, this gives us this opportunity to delegate control up to the top level controller to make any changes to the model or make changes to the view so that it can pass data into the view. So if we think about how this works, we will have to make a couple modifications to our base controller. So we're going to go into that right now. So when we think about what create action does, right now it doesn't do anything. Right now it's just a basic function, and it just returns the view. There's no defaults set. There's no data being pushed in. So what we need to do is add that, create a reference to that create initialize view. So I'm going to steal some code from here. And the other thing that we're going to do is I'm also going to steal some code from our API. So some of the concepts there we have in the post. One of them is creating an instance of T. And we're going to have that here because what we want to do is allow the upper model to create some some defaults if we need. Anything that is inheriting this will allow it to, we can now allow it to modify what model does and has available to it on the create view. So in this case, what we're doing is we're going to be adding a list of users into the view data so that when the view is going to consume that, it'll have that data available to it. So in order to do that, we need to think about what this does. Okay, so that employees list is going to pull in, first of all, in the model that's coming in, it's also going to have a list of employees. These are the current employees of the company. The next thing we need is a list of users who are potential employees of the company. And we need to cross-reference the two of them to see which ones are current and which ones are not, so that we give the model a list of users that are currently selected and those that are not currently selected. Okay, and to do this, I'm going to create I'm going to transform that list of users into a select item list, essentially. And that gives me the capabilities of having text, a value attribute or property, and a selected property. Okay, so with that, let's get started here. So we're going to say employees equals uh, model.employees.toList. So this sort of creates a disconnected copy for us, and that allows us to do some work with employees wherever we need. Next, we want to have a list of users, and our list of users needs to come from the user context, which means that we need to create a internal field for using our user context. And you know how I like to use my underscore for private. So in this case, I want the user context dot users dot get all. Okay. And we're going to convert that to a list as well, so that again we have a disconnected list of users. I'll just get rid of this little error here so it doesn't annoy all of us. The next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to transform that list of users into a select list that will go into a view data dictionary here. So this one here will have, it's going to be called company.employees. In other words, the key is employees at this point. And we're going to transform the users into a, oops, there we go, select list item. Okay. Now by having this, you'll see that we have this great ability to have, we can disable items, we can group items, we can select items, we can give it text, and we can give it a value. We're going to use select, text, and value. Those are the ones that we're going to be used. But we really could use some really cool features here too if we really wanted to pass it up to the controller. But we're not going to get too fancy on this today. So with that, I'm going to specify text as x.email, so that'll be the email for the user. The value will equal x.id, and then selected, this is where things get interested. We have our employees, and what we're going to do here is just cross-reference whether there is any employee with the user ID that equals the ID that's coming in from users. So in order to do that, we have something like this. So we do y.userid equals x.id. So ID is coming from up here. Okay. Coming from users. And user ID is coming from the employees, which is a type of user, or a user ID in this case. We have an employee and then we have a reference to a user. So that's all we need to have in this case to pass that data up to the view. Now, when we think about what the view does, let's go down into the views here. And we're going to start off by looking at the create view. Now, the create view is fairly straightforward. It's what we're going to have is a form control. So we'll have our form group. Okay. All right. So our form group sort of wraps all the controls inside of it. Okay. And that means that we're going to have a label. The label is going to be for a list of controls called employee. All right, and the class on this is using Bootstrap as well, so nothing too fancy, but it is going to be a control label. And we'll give the text will be employee as well. Now, I can use the name of for both of these functions here. So rather than saying for as the as employee, I'm going to use something that's a little bit more concrete. So here I'm going to do name of employees, and I can do the same thing down here in for. So now we've got the form group set up. All we need now is a for loop that actually iterates over each one of the users. So I'm just going to say, call it employee, and I'm going to create a collection named employees. So employees will come from here, and this will be employees, and that'll equal view data, just like we did in the initializer. It'll look like this. Here, I'll just steal this little code rather than writing it out. And I'm going to transform that into a IEnumerable of type select list item. Okay, so with that, actually, I'm going to delete some of these braces here so we don't have too many of those. There we have it. All right, now the next thing that we can do is we can set up a checkbox form, and I'm just going to steal some code from another view over here. Now, this here is your basic checkbox that you'd find in Bootstrap. The input name in this case is going to be employees. So we're going to do something like this here. I'm going to call it input name. Okay, and it'll be like this. Okay, and then each iteration over the control is going to assign a new control ID to each one of the checkboxes. So I'll do that too, and each checkbox will have its own format of how that will be um, represented. So if we do this, we'll take the actually input name, and then we need the employee dot value. So this is going to be this will be employees underscore and then the user ID that will be here. So now we've got the employees. And just to be consistent, because I know that I'm going to change this later on, I'm going to just call this item. So that way it'll all be very consistent with um, a view that I'm going to create later on. Now, let's just explain what's happening here. So we have this checkbox. The checkbox has a value, which is the user ID. The ID of this input is the control ID. The next thing that I do here is I use that select list or that selected property to determine whether it's selected. And if it is selected, I just simply add in checked as the as an attribute on the input. And then finally, I add in a label with the text that I've specified. In this case, it's just the user's email. So that should be enough to get us going on the create side. So let's just see if this is working so far. All right, so we're in our companies list. Let's see if create new works with our employees, and it does. So we have, I know that it's filtered out my name in here. So we've got 2 employees that are potential that can be used for our new employees for our company. So that's excellent. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to do the same for our edit view. So I'm going to take this code, and you can kind of see, if you've been watching my videos, you can kind of see what I'm going to be doing here is at some point, I'm going to look at this and say, that's too much code, and I'm going to be putting it into an editor template, but we'll do that soon. Then the next thing that we're going to look at is we'll test our edit view. But before we do, actually, I just remembered that we need to override the edit initialize view. So in order to do that, that's a really simple thing to do. Edit initialize view. Now, we have the same code here that we would use down in edit. So what I'm going to do is really simply apply the same code. And to do that, we're going to do create initialize view and pass in the entity, entity. There we have it. Okay, let's give this a try. We'll see if our edit view works the way it needs to. All right, we're here at our companies list. Let's click on edit, and we do have a employees list the way we want it. All right, now the next thing that we want to be doing here is we also want to have a bullet list for details and delete. Now, the details and delete bullet list is very, very simple to do. And we just have to look at it like this here. So in this case, I love using these, the display and editor templates. So I'm going to use those today. And all we have to do is go into the shared folder on views and type display templates. I'm going to add in editor templates as well because I know I'm going to use it later. Okay, so with that, I'm going to create a display template and I'm going to name it bullet list. Now, when you're thinking about designing components like this, your reusability is really important. And in this case, what we're looking to do is we're creating a component that I can drop anywhere in my application and it will always display a bullet list this way. Okay. The advantage there is that I've got a very consistent user experience, and that's what you're always aiming for. If you have a bullet list that looks like this, and then something else that looks like this, one has bullets, the other one has stars, the other one has question marks, it's a very bad user experience. So what you're trying to do is create something that has nice consistency. Now, in order to do this, we have a couple things that we want to work on. The first step is qualifying whether we actually have a model being an enumerable of string. The reason it's just a string is because all we're saying is here's a list of strings and each entry in the list is a string. So it's not very complicated. So if the model is equal to null or model dot count equals 0, then we can just return. We don't need to display anything. All right. Otherwise, we do want to display something. And in that case, we're just going to do a for each. And we can do an iteration over model and very simply output item. Okay. Now to make that work, we're going to make some modifications to our display here for details. And we can very easily do a variable for display items. And to display the items, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to extract just the user ID from the employee, not the user ID, but the user email. So we can do user email, there we go. And all we have to do is this. We just add in that little for display for, and we place display items as the variable. And then we tell display for which template to use. So let's give this a try now. Okay, so we're at our companies list. Let's take a look at a company that I know already has employees attached. So if I go to details, you can see now that we have a list of current employees. So the next step is very simply, we can add that same functionality into our delete view. So we'll take that over to the delete. Okay. And let's go ahead and save that. And if I go into delete now, and there we have it. Okay. So all of our views are now wired up to either consume or display employees. So let's go back into our code and understand what we need to do to actually get this data into our database. So in the company's controller, we have a feature, and we called that feature create pre-add handler. So that is one that we're going to override. Create pre-add handler. And let's just understand what happens here. So when we look at the way this works, so if I go into create pre-add handler is right there. So it intercepts the model, uh, delegates that up to the top level controller, allows us to do some changes to the model or to the view, or interacting with the, not the view, but interacting with the request that's coming in. I can make changes here. I can absorb some of that request data. I can push that data into the model. I can delete things from the model so I can ensure that it's a safe model as well. There's a lot of little things that I can do here that will allow me to absorb things properly. So what I'm going to be doing, however, is I want to pull in a list of employees that were selected from the request. So I can do select, I can do the request.form, and I'm going to take in, if you recall how we named this, the employees. So I'm using this naming convention quite often throughout the entire application here, and that's why I love the name of feature, because I can keep using that as a model for naming conventions throughout. So let's run this and see what comes back. Okay, let's try a create and see what happens here. We'll click on a couple of these things, add some employees. And what we're going to see on the result side here is that we've got this list of employees that's coming in, and you can see that it's separated by a comma right here. This means I've selected two items. Now, when I just go through here, what I do want it to do in the bullet list as well is just simply say no data, so I can also add some of that feature. But the key is that our create is actually sending the data the way we want it to do. So this is good. So let's make a quick modification to our bullet list. And you can sort of see what's the benefit of here of using this shared list, because if I ever really needed this to work across a bigger application, um, I've got it streamlined so that it automatically kind of can update without me having to do a lot of work. So I'm going to do no data, just like that. And you'll see the next time I load this up, it's going to show no data if there is nothing to show. Now, let's go back into our pre-add handler and start thinking about what we have to do to get employees into um, our company. Okay, so now what we want to do, now that we have our list of employees coming in, what we can actually do here is iterate over that list of employees and inject them into our company employees. So to do that, we can take model.employees inside of this, and we can iterate over the list of employees. And each iteration, we're going to generate a new employee. Now, the best thing about entity framework is that we don't have to specify company ID or company. It already understands that it's part of that company model. So we're going to very simply just apply it just like this. And now that I've got that function, I can very simply just run this and it'll automatically add those employees. So let's give it a try. All right, so we're in our companies list. Let's try to create a new company here. We'll do something like this. We'll select the two employee users there, and we'll just click on create. And there we have it. So we now have a company that works with the employees. Now we need to wire up the edit feature, and that'll be fairly simple there. But the on the updating side, it's different than it would be by create, because when a new company comes in with no employees, we don't have to think about what's there previously. Okay, so if I've got one employee previously, I don't need to add that employee again. I just need to update it. But if I have deleted something and added something, I also have to think about the deletes and updates as to that list as well. So in this, we will also do something here where we do edit post find handler. So just so you have some reference, if we look at the edit right here, this is this point right here. So at this point, we're getting the current item from the database that allows us to make some changes to that current item based on the model that's coming in from the form. Okay. So with that, we can go back over to the company controller and we can consume that data. Now, in this case, let's just set that up here. Okay, now it's going to be very similar in the way this works. However, it will also require that it needs to delete some of those employees. So we also need to think about how that works. Now, in this case, we have to send a delete to the list of employees that are currently in the system. So for this, we have a really nice function that we can actually use within our employees repository. So if we look back down to our user context, what we want to be thinking about is that repository and how it can be used to delete things. So look to the repository, and we had our employees, and we want to run a delete on a list of employees. And where do we get that list? Well, we get it from our current employee or current entity right here, and we can take all those employees and pass them through that delete. And this is our delete many that we had set up a couple of videos ago. So with that, now we've got this nice function that allows us to delete the current employees, and just you generally don't have to worry too much about transactional problems. If the transactional problems happen during this process, then usually it rolls back, and it's fairly good at rolling back those transactions. So it sends a delete to all the employees that are in the list, and then adds back any of them that are coming in from the form. Okay, so let's give this a try. And I just realized I made a mistake here. So we're not adding the employees to the model, we're adding it to entity, because entity is the current. So we're actually receiving data from model and updating the entity. So let's try this one more time here. All right, we're in our companies list again. Let's see what happens when we do an edit. So when we have an edit, we can change that. Let's click on save. We now have a, an active employee there. Again, I can add more, and we have our list of employees. I can remove employees and have no problems. I can remove again and show no data. So our edit and create functions are working fine. Something to think about here is that we've got some duplicated code, okay? And that duplicated code, we can do something with this so that it is a little bit more single point of failure. So we want to build a private function here. I'm just going to call it add employees. Okay, and add employees, we'll take a company and we'll call that company, why not? And it's going to take a nullable list or array of user IDs, or let's call it employees. Doesn't matter what we call it, but essentially what we're trying to say is a list of something. So our list comes from here, from this request. and our iteration comes from here. So I'm going to take this code, move it down. I'm also going to do a quick qualifier to say if employees um, equals null, then we can return because we don't need to add any employees if we're returning. And then let's see, we'll do this as well. Now, something that we can do actually is this. We can also take our delete down into here. And that is because, actually, I'm just going to make this an async so that we are able to use some of those other functions. All right. And it's going to ignore this if it's null. So if I put it into the add or end edit, it's not going to give us any trouble because it already has error correction there, and it won't be a problem. All right, so we can now very easily call await add employees, and we want to pass in entity. And we're going to ask for request form right there. And there we have it. So now I can simplify both of these calls so that they are very nice and concise. And, I could easily move up. I could easily call both at the same time, just like I've done before. I just call one inside the other, and it'll work just the same. But I'm going to keep it separate right now because there are certain times where things are very different in the behavior. At the moment, it's they're doing the exact same thing. So let's go ahead and run it. All right, so here we are back at our list. Let's see if our edit works. We'll add a few employees here. Looking like it works fine. Let's try a create new and just use one of these examples here. Looking good. We've got employees. Fantastic. Okay. Now, the next part. Now, one of the things that we have to do as well, we can add and edit our employees. What we now want to be able to do is delete a company. Now, to do that, we have to do a little bit of work behind the scenes on the company repository because the company repository will also require that we delete employees before we delete the company. So that's something that's really important to think about in terms of process. We can do that within the controller or we can do that within the repository. I'm going to choose the repository because this is going to be a common function that we do pretty much all the time. So let's think about this. So I'm going to delete a company, which looks like this. And all we need to do is override the delete. And I can do something like this. And that means that we can take the employees once more here. We can do await employees dot delete. And remember, because we're using employees in the context of our company repository, we always know that we've got an entity that is actually something that is related to this company, the way this works. Now, we can take that list of employees and we can run it and delete the multiple employees there before we actually run the delete on the company. So let's try this out. Okay, so we're back at our list of companies. Let's try to do a delete here. We'll make sure that this company actually has employees, which it does. We'll go back to the list and we'll try to delete that. So when we look at here, we see that this does have employees. If we click delete, it goes off and deletes the company and deletes the employees before it deletes the company. So that made a very nice, clean, and fast delete process. That's very important. And when you're deleting entities that have a lot of connections and relationships, this is a very important process. Okay, so let's just go back down, and there was one more thing that I wanted to add in here, and I wanted to add in our editor template for the checkbox list. All right. Now our checkbox list has a bunch of very common things that it does. I'm going to do some renaming, and I'm going to call this, instead of employees, I'm going to call it items. And what I'm going to be looking at here is I'm trying to generify once again. So when you think about generics, you don't want to be using specific naming conventions all the time. So in order to make this work really well, we want to think about generic naming conventions as much as possible. So let's think about what we have to do here. We're going to add in the editor template, and I'm going to call this checkbox list. Okay, checkbox list. All right, now the checkbox list has all the information that is coming in from the view, and that is this information right here. So we're going to take all of that and we're going to place it into the view. Now, before we do, it has a model that will come in as an IEnumerable select list item. List item like that. Okay. And we can paste this in. Now, obviously, we're not going to be using employee and employees and all the rest. So what I'm going to be doing here is just start by making some subtle modifications. I'm going to keep employees for now, but we will eventually make some changes that'll be kind of cool and make it really easy to work with. Now, at the moment, this is pretty much good to go. We can add in an editor for, and what we can do here, and this is kind of neat. I always find using these little tools pretty cool. We can name of, and of course we're just going to use the same function that we used here, just like that. And that means that it's going to be calling the view data that was available to it. View is called checkbox list, checkboxed list. And finally, what I'm going to be passing in at another point is, and I'm going to interrupt this in a moment, but I'm going to also give it a control name. And the way we pass this in is just by simply giving it an anonymous object. So I'm going to give this a name of employees. Okay. And that's going to substitute some of the information where we've got label, name, and things like that placed in there. So I'm going to comment that out, and we should be good to go. Let's give this a try and see what our create view looks like now. All right, we're back at our companies list. Let's try our create. And looks like everything worked the way it's supposed to. We do have our controls and checkboxes. Let's just make sure that our names are coming in as the way they're expected. So we have our control name, our label name. Excellent. So everything has gone in the way we expected at the moment. So let's continue to make some modifications to our checkbox list so that it's more consistent by allowing us to make some changes for labeling and things like that. So you saw me create an anonymous object as I pass that in is essentially view data. So I'm going to extract some of that information into the view. You saw me using the input name as one of those variables. So I'm going to take some of that information, I'm going to pass it up, and I'm going to use input name is now going to be coming from the view data. So with that, I can extract. So we have control name, and that's going to be as a string. So it's going to be converted to a string. So now, wherever we have input name throughout here, it will be referred to based on whatever control name was. So you can see I can start replacing these employees. I can use that, use what I have here now. Now, the default is going to be coming from the control name. But what if the user doesn't give me a control name? Here's a really neat little thing that you can do. So you can actually pull from view data, you can get the template info, and then you can get what's called the full HTML name. And this is kind of a cool little feature because what you can do here is you can ask for that control field name based on and it'll so like, the entity framework will sort of throw in certain things that it gets from the view and transfer them into this partial view right down here, which is pretty neat. So let's look at this for a second here. I'm kind of rambling, but I'm going to look for, we're saying that if input, sorry, just a second here. There we go. Okay, if control name, we want to get the control name from here. This went a little bit off the rails, but that's okay. We got it under control. So if control name is not null or empty, in other words, the user has provided us information to go back, to go into the view, that is, input name, and that means we're going to specify a control name. So I'll reiterate what this does. So input name is taking the full HTML name. And again, that is something that is built, if you don't specify, it's built within the view. If we specify a control name, it says, oh, you've specified a control name, which we are doing, and gives it replaces the value of input name with control name, and then propagates the rest of our list. So let's give this a try and see how this works now. All right, let's give this create view a shot again, and looks like it's still functioning the way we expect. Let's just double check that we've still got something functional here we can use, and we are. So we'll go back and now modify the edit, and that'll allow us to have some consistency across all of our views. And once more, we'll take away some of the code that's unnecessary, and we'll go into our edit, and we can now replace this code with our editor view. And we'll run this again and try our edit function. All right, so we're back at our companies list. Let's edit an item. We'll add 2 employees, looking good. Take it down to no employees, looking great. Okay, fantastic. Now, I have one final thing that I love to do in my models, in my applications anyway. I like to create a constants class. Now, a constants class can be really useful. In terms of this, the reason I like doing it is because I hate using strings. And if I can eliminate the use of strings for identifiers, I'm going to try to do that at all costs. And I'm going to create a constants class. All right. And constants is always going to be a static class. So constants is going to have a few internal classes that are going to be managed inside the constants class. So this will be views, not view. And then we're going to have public static, and views is going to have another class called shared. And you're going to see that what I'm doing here is I'm mimicking, in this case, I'm talking about views. So I'm mimicking that the views folder here. Okay. So I might have something like this as well. So I would also have something called companies. Okay. And companies would also have several views inside. Now, in this case, I'm going to have a const string and something that will represent bullet list and our checkbox list. Okay, so in this case, let's do that. Bullet list. And let's get the exact spelling here. And I'm just going to paste that in. So something like that is just fine. So now what I can do is I can refer to it rather than using the string version. I can refer to constants dot views dot shared dot checkbox. Okay. And of course, why not just copy that over to the edit so that it is consistent as well. And we'll do the same with our details. Now we can do constants dot views dot shared dot bullet list. Okay, now we can get rid of some of that, and I'll do the same with our delete so that it's also showing the proper stuff there too. Now there's obviously a lot more that I could do with this application as far as constants goes, but the important thing is that I'm eliminating some of that repetition, and I'm also eliminating some things that can easily be missed in the process. So again, we're trying to narrow down as many points of failure as possible. Now, in large applications, this may not be possible because there are so many opportunities that you can't narrow down. There, you may not know the entire breadth of the application. Maybe your focus is only on a part of the application. But if you've ever been instructed to make changes like this across an entire application, this is how you might be able to fix some of the potential challenges. So let's take a look here. We have a company. Let's add some employees. And looks like everything is referring to the correct views. Still, with even with making those changes, um, the create view is doing exactly what it's supposed to. So it looks like our application is still functioning very nicely. All right, so that's the end of this video. Now, this was a bit of a long one. There's a lot of depth here. I hope you're learning something, but the key is there's a lot of information that to absorb. And my voice is kind of like one of those nice little radio voices that kind of puts you to sleep. So I hope you're not asleep at this point, and I hope you love the video as much as I love making it for you. So remember to like and share, and please subscribe, comment often, do everything that you can to support the channel and what I'm doing for you. I hope it's useful. Love you all. Take care. Bye.